Well, it's a big political night, and we've had some big political decisions lately.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Tonight we're going to revisit last week's compelling decision on the part of the president to suggest that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and a timeline for the movement of the U.S. Embassy out of Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. A local flavor and expertise is coming your way momentarily on that. Also, the UHIP situation is, what's UHIP? Oh yeah, the big computer that doesn't work in Rhode Island. You know, this old Monty Python joke, so, did you ever hear that? I ain't dead yet! Some people either look dead and they're not, or some people are dead and we don't know it. The computer's not working. We'll check in with Target 12 on that coming up. Great to have you aboard. Sorry to joke about that, but the computer's not working. What are you going to do? It's Tuesday evening, and the nation is watching Alabama. Here's a headline. It's an explosive end for Roy Moore and Doug Jones. Of course, Roy Moore is the star of this show one way or the other. Most people are just making a decision on him, right? I don't think Doug Jones is an afterthought. I think he's done a pretty good job of raising his profile, and there's been a lot of help coming in. Here's the latest. I was thinking, I caught myself about what we have here for you. I thought what was really profound last night was Charles Barkley, who of course, played in the state, came back and gave him a dish of his own mind, that's for sure.
When people in your own party say they won't vote for you or support you, that's a dead giveaway. At some point, we got to stop looking like idiots to the nation.
See, I guess if you're from there, you can say that. Barkley's actually thought about running for governor there as a Republican at one point. So if you're watching at 7:30, it's still a nail-biter. If you're watching at midnight, you know the result. We'll be able to talk about it tomorrow night. We'll hear it on the radio. In the meantime, last week was a very, very busy week internationally, and the president made a provocative decision. I actually do think the timing of this has something to do with the Alabama election. Here's what CBS had to say about this just the other night.
Outrage continued to spill onto streets around the world Monday, with demonstrations against President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Mustafa Barghouti is a member of the Palestinian parliament.
We, the Palestinian people, refuse and reject Trump's decision. It means nothing to us.
In Gaza, following Mr. Trump's announcement, protesters carried guns and burned American flags. The Islamist group Hamas has warned more violence will come. Israel deployed extra police after an Israeli security guard was stabbed at a Jerusalem bus station. At street protests and clashes, the debate has been crude. And while diplomats may not be throwing stones, in the wake of President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem, the divisions are just as clear. In Brussels, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged European allies to follow President Trump's lead.
Jerusalem is Israel's capital. No one can deny it. It doesn't obviate peace. It makes peace possible.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas arrived in Cairo to rally Middle Eastern countries against Mr. Trump's decision. He says the U.S. can no longer lead peace talks.
And now officially we've heard from the White House that the meeting that had been scheduled between Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Vice President Mike Pence has been canceled.
It's a sticky one. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah to you as well.
This is Rabbi Barry's return trip. He's always welcome. He's a pretty cool thinker on this stuff. Your executive summary on what happened last week is what?
What happened last week is, in my mind, plain and good thing. Donald Trump's absolutely correct on this. I say that with a bit of caution. The one sort of caveat I would give is that many Jews voted for Donald Trump despite all of the negative stuff, specifically for this thing. And for me, that in no way obviates the harm that I believe he's caused to vulnerable populations, to civil discourse altogether. I don't know if he's the cause or a symptom, but to the extent that he's both, this isn't a fair trade-off, but this decision is, in my mind, and I think I speak for most of my community on this one, we're absolutely behind this 100% for a few different reasons. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. If anyone goes to Israel and you go there, that's where the Supreme Court is. That's where the legislature.
Obvious.
It's the capital. It's like saying Washington, D.C. is not the capital. And so denying that reality actually keeps peace from happening because it feeds a narrative. And that narrative is that the Jews have absolutely no right to any part of Israel, be it territories occupied post-1967 or before. The idea that there can be Jews in Israel is not okay. And the people that oppose the idea of Jerusalem as a capital of Israel and won't acknowledge that, won't acknowledge a Jewish presence in that place at all. And I do think this pushes peace forward. You know, they weren't getting peace before. It's not like there was some grand peace that was on the verge of happening between Palestinians and Israelis. And one of the reasons that hasn't happened, whereas it has happened with Jordan, it has happened with Egypt, it's happened with other countries, is because they were able to recognize and give up on the hateful and really anti-Semitic notion that Jews need to be thrown into the sea, which is what you heard again from many Arab leaders after this declaration. There were chants of, you know, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, the Jordan River, the Mediterranean.
So what do you
Jews into
think?
the sea.
Do you think that this is going to flush that emotional, historical, hateful reaction from the Palestinian side? Because, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think
is it like coughing up the phlegm?
I think the hope is that, you know, this isn't some tangent. A lot of people have said, even some people in the Jewish community, oh, this is a final status negotiation issue. This is the thorniest issue. Let's deal with everything first, and then maybe one day we'll come to, you know, Jerusalem will be unified, we'll divide it, that kind of thing. But I think I think Donald Trump is probably doing this just for cynical political reasons. Maybe we can distract from Roy Moore. Maybe I'll get evangelicals about Hanukkah's coming.
Well, I don't even think it's a distraction from Roy Moore. I think there's an evangelical community in Alabama that's got this, you know, Zionist position that they've convinced themselves that this is all part of their own mantra, political and spiritual, faith-based mantra. So I thought it was timed actually for that purpose. So he's tripped himself up a couple of times since, you know, so maybe people forget that. But I thought it was strategically placed.
So that could very well be. Nonetheless,
you'll take the gift horse, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it is ultimately good for peace. In other words, until, and peace isn't just a document that people sign in territories people work on. I mean, real peace is on the ground. You know, how friendly will relations be? You know, will there be people from Israel shopping in Arab villages and vice versa, as there were at many times in the last 60 years? You know, people don't recognize that. It's not as if the two sides don't interact. Many places everywhere you go, there are Arabs, there are Jews, there are Christians, there are all kinds of people interacting in different ways. But there's not going to be peace until there's Palestinian recognition that Jews have a right to live there. Not to say that Israel doesn't have some things it could do better, but fundamentally, the Palestinian failure to acknowledge Jewish rights in the land of Israel is a sticking point. And if this forces them to sort of get over that or recognize that that has to happen, then that probably does ultimately promote peace.
So what you're telling me, I think, is that this is not a catch-22, that this is actually the horse before the cart that you think needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the State Department narrative, you know, the State Department for a long time has not only opposed recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. You know, if you're born in Jerusalem, in Israel right now, your passport just says Jerusalem. It doesn't say Israel, it just says Jerusalem. And people are suing right now to see if that will change given this, this reality. But the State Department pushing that, it harkens back to 1947. They wanted it to be an international city. What they called a corpus separatum. And since it has nothing to do with the Six-Day War. Since 1947, there's been State Department policy. Jerusalem isn't Israel. But there's no other country in the world, however legitimate or illegitimate the State Department feels the capital is, not one, where they don't recognize the sovereign country's right to declare its own capital.
Got that. Yet, guess what? In the international community, there's only one country that's now recognized Jerusalem as the capital. It's us. We'll talk about that when we come back. Okay?
First of all, I think that when you recognize the truth, when both parties recognize reality, peace comes, and that's just the true reality of the situation. We are living in the reality that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. But if you notice, when the president spoke, he made it very clear. He didn't talk about boundaries. He didn't talk about borders. He didn't get into any of that, because the final status of Jerusalem is between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's not for the Americans to decide. So.
But is it for the Americans to broker Nikki Haley, our ambassador to the United Nations? I don't know, Rabbi. I think that there are very smart people, some of whom happen to be Jewish, who push back on this notion that this was a tactically smart thing for the country to do, that our role as peace negotiator and broker, right, mediator, whatever the word is damaged by this given assertion that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, because the Palestinians have such a problem and the Muslim community has such a problem with it.
So I want to push back on several fronts of that.
Yeah. By the way, I mentioned that during the break, I got checked off during the commercial, that there are countries out there that are supporting this. Czechoslovakia jumped in.
The Czech Republic actually followed the U.S., and then Russia on the Security Council, on the UN Security Council, also recognized
But they condemned this decision, because that's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump's a little toxic, and they don't like the U.S. There's always those dynamics causing a little bit of extra condemnation on
so
this.
America's role as a broker in this being affected, I think, is the chief concern here. I'm not sure that I have found anybody who argues against the decision who believes that Jerusalem inevitably ought to be understood as the capital of Israel. So I think it's really a tactical negotiating critique than a conceptual one.
Right. So I would say that I think this is actually good in that regard for the negotiation potentially. I also don't think there's been as much anger in the Arab world as the media would make it out to be.
Pictures can amplify reality.
Yeah, so you can. A good example is the Intifada. People spoke about how there's going to be a new Intifada, and the Palestinian Authority actually called for a strike, which they enforced. Shopkeepers closed their shops. Actually, many of them kept them open partially, and there were police going around to enforce the strike. Schools were closed, and they basically called for a day of rage, closed all the schools, enforced closure of all the shops, and then said, everyone please go out and protest. And there were a couple of thousand people out there protesting, maybe 4,000, but the Women's March got more people. I'm not saying there's not legitimate anger directed at Donald Trump, but if you close schools and unleash teenagers onto the street, you'll get some good photo ops. The protests have almost entirely died down. On Friday, which is the day where these things usually explode because it's the day of worship at the Temple Mount, Israel made a good decision. Normally they limit who can pray there during a tense time to people over a certain age, so it's only elderly people. So if you don't have younger people, you'll have less violence. They didn't do that this time. They didn't limit who could come. That was a wise decision. Protests and violence, for the most part, didn't break out. And so it's kind of died down. As to the broker issue, my personal feeling is that either A, the U.S. is now in a better position to be a broker. If one side to an equation won't recognize a sometimes the negotiator has to come in and say, look, you have to own up to what's going on here. Your position is untenable. Come more to the middle. It could be that that's what's going on here, or it could be that the U.S. is done, in a sense, being a broker. Many of these attempts at brokering peace were sort of infantilizing of the Palestinians. The narrative was, if the Israelis would just fold, there'd be peace.
Right. Let me ask you this. Is the tangible movement of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem really important?
It's
because I bet you ain't going to make a 6-month timeline.
It's really not important where the embassy is. I'm sure that most Americans before this happened had no idea where the embassy in Israel was, and in a week they won't know either.
What about Israelis?
Israelis across the political spectrum, from the labor left-wing Zionist parties to the right-wing Likud and the government, all basically support this. The sort of left-wing socialist and Arab joint list don't support this, but all of the Zionist parties from the left to the right strongly support this. This has the backing of the Israeli public.
All right. Give me a 30-second projection. What happens from here?
Well, predicting what happens in the Middle East is, I'm not a prophet, I'm not a soothsayer, but I actually think that this moves the narrative forward. I think that eventually Palestinians will come to recognize a little bit more what happens here. I think this will also be heightened by Israeli allyship with Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia. Those are growing really strong. Saudi Arabia's pushing very quickly for normalization of ties with Israel. It's the leader, it's the bellwether. I think they and the United States pressure the Palestinians, and we get a deal we could have had 16 years ago, but for poor leadership.
Well, thanks for your perspective. Appreciate it. It's a fascinating conversation, right? All right, when we come back, we're going to take a look at what's happening with the UHIP situation. And we should probably remind you that if you're looking to manage, how about over here? If you're looking to manage your banking world in the palm of your hand, the best way to do it is with the Card Valet app. All you got to do is download it from the App Store for the Navigant Credit Union, become a member, go online at navigantcu.org or stop by one of the many branches, and all of a sudden you're going to find as much sophistication as you could possibly imagine right here on your smartphone. Check it out. Right back on the UHIP situation. Stay with us.